So I'm going to start making YouTube videos on certain vehicles for the simple fact of they change shit on many different Chevy and Ford, and I don't really deal with Dodge because they're junk, but the one I'm going to go on for this video is the Chevrolet S10. This one here is a 99. I'm not 100% sure what year the motor is that I put in, but I know it's not a 95, but we're going to say between a 97 to a 98. But I got this motor out of the junkyard with the transmission for $600 at Sigmund's, and basically they're overrun, and they basically crushed the Blazer before they fucking got the rest of the shit out. So reason being I say that is the S10 standard comes with a 2.2 4-cylinder, majority of them. That's the standard for the S10 versus the Blazer. The Blazer very much comes standard with the 4.3 Vortec, which is what this came out of, was a Blazer. So I'm going to kind of give a quick shoot of what I've got to change, basically where I'm at, kind of. I've pretty much got it in the whole way, but gist of it is, move this shit. So, there's your 4.3. As you can see, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the 2.2, but it's a lot smaller. The 4.3 is nothing more than a 350 small block with the last two cylinders cut off of the design. It's the same engine, just fewer cylinders. But there's two major differences between the setup of the 2.2 and the 4.3. First one being is the motor mounts, which is what most people are going to be wondering about right offhand, which is a very minor change in comparison to what you actually have to change to put this in. First thing would be the motor mounts. Okay, your regular motor mounts that you're going to get with your 4.3 Vortec most likely, unless it came out of another S10 maybe. I'm not familiar if the S10, if you take an S10 motor and drop it in another S10 with a 4-cylinder, if it's, I don't know if it's actually going to be, different than this. I'm assuming not, because chances are if you have the 4.3 in there, it's also going to be a 4-wheel drive, which I forgot to mention. This is a 2-wheel drive truck, and it's staying a 2-wheel drive. But I can't show you because everything is attached already, because I decided to make this video late. The mounts that mount to the frame, not the rubberized mounts that mount to your motor, have a different bolt pattern. And they will still work if you get it from the junkyard or buy them or whatever you end up doing with it. But you have to, it's either going to be your left or right side. It doesn't really matter which way you orient them. Only one of them fits on directly to the factory hole mounts. You're going to need a hole tap to the same thread. I forget what the thread was that you need to get the tap for, but the way they're in here is you got to tap the holes yourself to get the threads in the holes. The holes are already there, but they need tapped. I don't recommend ever drilling into your frame for any stupid reason. Another thing that I've seen a lot of people doing was they were cutting their subframe to get to the bolts. I don't know what kind of bullshit they were trying to do, but once you pull the motor out, which you don't even need to do that, there's one bolt that goes straight through your rubber mount into your frame mount. And once you pull that out, your engine's free. So you don't need to do that, for one. And second, your bolts that hold to the frame mounts face up. So for whatever stupid reason they were under there cutting holes in their frame to get to the mounting bolts, I couldn't tell you, but shit, you don't need to do that whatsoever. That's not a very good idea, and it weakens the frame. Damn. But on to the pressing matter. The holes for the brackets, all I did with mine, the smaller bracket, I took it and put it on the passenger side, and I took a carbide bit air Dremel and I widened the holes to make them mount straight. And the way it orients is pretty much completely straight. You just got to watch whenever you Dremel out your hole or whatever you end up doing with it, that you leave enough steel on whichever side you're going towards that you don't weaken the actual mount. You can use a washer if you wish, but if you just use the right bolt, you shouldn't have an issue. The other thing, the biggest thing really, your PCM. Okay, I'm just using this as an example because this one here I got to change in with a different one, but I'm going to explain why I say that. That PCM there is from the Blazer. Okay, the other one that'll be in your truck if you're doing it from a 4-banger to a 6-cylinder, right here. It'll look like this. Okay, they're not the same whatsoever. The wiring's completely different, so don't even, I mean, if you want to, you can try and wire 80 wire lines to get your damn motor to run, or you go to the junkyard and get the wiring harness like I was going to do, but they crushed the vehicle, so I have to go pull one out of another vehicle. And that's another thing, you can pull it out of almost any vehicle, so long as you have the harness, all these harnesses on the motor that are in the dash, you're pretty much good other than under the dash. Okay, now this is where it's going to get fun. And here's why I got to change that PCM, not because it won't work, but this little box here, it's underneath your dashboard. I don't know if you can see this, but as you can see, it's got numbers on it. But these two boxes, I mean, you can, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure yet, but last time I did one of these, I changed both these boxes. Okay, otherwise what you're gonna have to do, and I pretty much already know you'd have to do that, because you would have to have your PCM, you'd have to take it to a dealership or somebody that can reprogram the powertrain control unit to run the vehicle, because there's a VIN verification between the two computers in the vehicle. Now, you're not going to be able to see anything in here, but I had to rip out the entire, I mean, that's what I did. You can do whatever you wish if you feel like wiring everything, or, you know, you can take an hour and just rip it out and put in a new one and save yourself all that aggravation. But you got to take everything off the bottom of the dash, you got to disconnect everything, and you got to run it back through. Now, the way the other one is, whenever you go to pull it out of whatever, if you're pulling it yourself, right down in here, there's this little rubber insulator. Whenever you pull it out of the other one, don't destroy it like I did on here, because you're going to need that. I destroyed it plainly for the fact of I'm ripping it out of another vehicle and they're exactly the same. And I don't plan on, well, what's a better way of putting it? Whenever I ripped it out of this truck here, because I can't use the one that it came with at all, unless I rewire it, I just cut it and pulled it out. But you got to basically slip it through that hole to get everything inside. Now, another very important thing for any of you that are haven't had the motor pulled already and don't have your engine already in here, if you're pulling out the 4-banger, and this is a very key thing that I did and will always do, as I tried the first time, don't try to unbolt the motor from the transmission. You can do it, but it's not worth it. For two reasons. First reason is it's a bitch. Second reason, your transmission, the bell housing on it, they're different. The 2.2 is a different motor altogether. It's not the same as the 4.3 Vortec or the 5.7 liter 8-cylinder. They're completely different. The only two that are the same are the 4.3 and the 5.7, because they are the same motor technically. Or at least in the way of how they're manufactured versus what they actually are, though. But whenever you go to pull out your 2.2, disconnect your drive shaft, which is really easy, back on your rear axle, depending on what you actually have. You have a 4-wheel drive, it's going to be different. I'm not even going to go over how you do that, because that's going to be a whole other thing, and somebody's going to nitpick why in the hell I said how to do it whenever I'm not looking at it. But you got to remove your transmission bracket, okay, and you got to remove the drive shaft, which on this truck here and on the other truck that I did was just 2 bolts or 4 bolts on the rear shaft with 2 pins connecting your universal. You pull that off, you pull out your drive shaft, disconnect the transmission mounts, disconnect motor mounts, disconnect everything under the hood to the motor that you're pulling out. You take out your core support. You have to take out the core support unless you're as good as I am and can actually manage to get it out, transmission and all. Okay, and you got to pick it straight up over. Now, I don't recommend that because it's a wobbly motherfucker. Once it's up that high, I even have a 1-ton crane and it was wobbly as hell. But once you get that out, okay, what you want to do is you want to save everything on that motor, except for the motor itself, to get your core back, because most junkyards want a core. Now, what I recommend, because it's easier, if you have a motor that has low mileage, just have them take the transmission and the motor out from the junkyard and just slide it back in the same way. You can do it in 2 parts on the 4.3, a lot easier because of the way it sits in here. You can put the transmission in first and then put the motor in, or put the motor in first and slide the transmission in, but I mean, hell, it's a lot easier just to slide it on as one piece. But here's the key trick to this. When you go to slide this in, your cab actually has to move up. And another thing that I always do whenever I do on the S10, the firewall here, there's a little lip that they add to the 2.2. I'm not sure if it's on the 4.3. I don't really remember because I just hacked it up the last time I did it. I take a Sawzall and I cut off that lip and just make it flush. It's not important. It ain't going to hurt the vehicle any not having it there. It's just extra shielding, I guess, but you get a much better clearance and it slides in easier, because what you're literally going to do, if you want to do it the easy way at least, is you're going to basically have the motor and the transmission, and you're going to let the motor and the transmission pick up on the cab to give you that extra play to get the oil pan in without hitting the frame, and the transmission. Now, it's a lot easier sounding than what it really is, but, you know, if you're, I wouldn't say patient, really, as I ain't all that patient. I wasn't patient with it either. If you push it in just right, you'll miss your distributor and everything, it'll slide right in there. Now, once you get that in, unless, you know, by some odd chance, your S10's different than this one and the last one I did, you're going to have to put a spacer underneath your transmission mount, or change the bracket, which I don't recommend because most people ain't that good of a welder. Me, I'm a welder, I can do that. I didn't though, because it's a pain in the ass and it ain't worth it. I took hockey pucks and longer bolts and put it underneath the transmission rubber mount and extended it out basically. That worked really good. It works every time and it's just as strong, so long as you use the right grade bolt. Okay, so with that said, that's all there, okay? Another thing you got to make sure of whenever you connect up your transmission and that to the linkage, before you put in your drive shaft, just because it's already out, I recommend changing your universals if you're using the same shaft, or a junkyard shaft, period. Only for the simple fact is they go bad, and you can use the 2.2 drive shaft. It ain't going to hurt it any. It's steel. It can handle the torque. The truck isn't that heavy. But you best replace your universals, just because you don't want to be climbing back under there a couple months later whenever you break all your universals. Okay, phase 2. On this truck, because of its age, and I don't think it's going to be any different for anyone else, when you take out your core support, do yourself a favor and rust treat it. Mine looks like it's not rust treated, it's just painted white, just because that's what I had, and because once the grill and everything's on, you can't see it anyways. It was cheaper just to paint it white, because I don't care. But use rust converter or whatever, wire brush the hell out of it, paint it, knock off any of the loose sheet metal that you can, and then put it back in, just so you know, your core support doesn't rust out on you, because they will. Another key thing is to check all your wheel wells, and whenever you're doing the wire harness on the inside of the truck, ripping it out, check the floorboard right up next to the firewall for any holes, because that's going to cause you problems in the future. Ain't no point in putting a nice motor in something whenever there's big holes in the cab. What would be another thing? Oh, that's right. To pull out your 2.2, You don't need to remove the drive shaft, but to put in the 4.3, I recommend it. I mean, you can actually get around it, but it's just so much easier just to take the drive shaft or the steering shaft the fuck off and let it dangle there, because it can move then. Another thing, don't leave the headers on the truck unless you're just that damn good at doing this that you can just slide it in. Me, I was gonna do it that way, except for the fact of I'm putting custom exhaust on this, so it doesn't matter if I just cut part of the flange off, one of the legs for the bolt holes, because I'm welding the exhaust straight to the flange on there. It's not going to be bolted on anymore. So, depending on what you're doing, remove your headers. And another key important thing, you know, if you don't know if the vehicle leaks or not, you know, or the engine, change all the head gaskets and intake gaskets just in case. But I tested this one before I put it in. I had it started on the ground before I actually put it in. It doesn't leak. What's another thing? I mean, just the basis of it overall. If you're gonna drop and do this project in here, for one, put in something that you want. Don't put in something with you know, 300,000 miles on it. That's gonna be a loss. And basically take your time with it. Another thing though, I just noticed that you're definitely going to have to change is your throttle cable. The throttle cable for the 4.3 is much longer. It's almost 2 feet longer than the 2.2 throttle cable, because of where it has to go. Some things I've seen people do in the past that really wasn't very smart was they cut the firewall, and instead of prying out the insert, which goes right here, okay, if you pry it out, chances are you're going to destroy the firewall unless you have an immense amount of patience to play with that plastic spacer and all that shit. But even at that, you're probably still going to have it messed up. So whenever you go to put it in, just get in there kind of snug and take like a liquid cement, like a epoxy, or almost like a caulking cement, and just put that in there real thick. For two reasons: it'll keep the moisture out of your cab, and it'll hold it. This stuff's very strong, so you ain't gotta worry about it. Your throttle cable really doesn't move, except for at the end. Another important thing, I guess, would be when you get it from the junkyard, if you have the 2.2, they're gonna try and tell you that, because they don't really know or care, probably, that your AC pump, your alternator, they're not going to mount the same as on the 2.2. They are different, so make sure you get them as well. A lot of junkyards, I know they won't give you the air filter or the air hose or any of that. You need the air box, air filter, mass airflow sensor, and your snorkel. You're going to need all that, so make sure you get that too, because chances are they're just going to crush it. Radiator as well. Get the other radiator. They are different. The other one is a little bit bigger. As for the people going from 350 to from the 4.3 to the 350 swap for a Blazer, all I can say about it is this: more power to you. That's an excellent swap for that vehicle, or an S10 even. But you're going to be doing about the same amount of work, really. All depends on what you want, really. But for the S10, I recommend doing the 4.3 swap, just for the simple fact of you're going to lose a lot of space to begin with, and whenever you put the 350 in, you're going to have to compensate for more room loss because the engine's longer, so you're going to actually have to change your front end in order to get it to fit. Your other, basically your best option is to go with whatever the truck and SUV, whatever the hell it is you're trying to swap in. Stick with what it comes with, factory. I mean, the 2.2 and the 4.3 are factory options. That's not a big deal. 350 swap, it's an excellent swap. I've done it. It's amazing the turnout you get from it, but it's a lot of work for what it's worth. You cut down your gas mileage, and you basically got something that's got too much power for what it's good for. But hey, I'm not the judge of that. I'd do it any day of the week just because I can. Would be another thing, your grounds. Make sure you put, there's going to be factory mount grounds on here, but I recommend making new grounds. The simple fact of chances are they're not very well connected anymore from all the rust. So all your grounds and rusted areas, your firewall, that's rare I've ever seen a firewall that was rusted to hell and back, but your core support, make sure you redo all them grounds. Your battery holder, take it out, wire brush it real well. Put the rust converter on and paint 3 coats of paint on it. That'll help keep that lasting, because they rust that from sitting under there. They get battery acid and crap on them and it makes them rust. Just little things that are going to save you a lot of aggravation in the future and during your swap over. Another thing, if you live in a residential neighborhood and you're doing this in your driveway, you better be quick about it, because the township will be on your ass most likely if it's anything like Hempfield. Gist of it is, if you're going to do the swap, you don't need a hell of a lot of know-how to do this swap really, but I'm going to recommend this. If you have no actual vehicle knowledge, don't do it. Right now I've got about $900 into this swap, just the motor alone, not the truck itself. So that gives you a ballpark about what it's going to cost you. I don't know, I'm going to go off of what most people end up paying to do this, just the 4.3 swap, which is a relatively cheap swap to do. Even the 350 swap's pretty cheap. I'm going to say it's going to cost you about, I'd say $1,000 to $1,200. It's not a terribly expensive endeavor, but you need to definitely take into consideration the fact that how good you are at fabricating and also how good you are as a mechanic, because both things are going to factor into how well this goes for you and also how much money you're going to spend. But 2 biggest things right offhand is you got to make sure you get your motor in and out right without damaging anything. And you got to make sure the vehicle you're putting it in is actually worth putting it in, because this isn't going to be like, oh, I'm going to take a weekend, drop the motor in, and then the next weekend I'm going to have it done. You're not going to have it done that damn quick unless, you're on welfare and don't have anything better to do with your life and sit over here and dick around with S10s and Blazers. So, yeah, basically, it's taken me, I have about, I don't know, so far I got about maybe 8 days onto this truck altogether, including the body touch-ups I did, planning and everything. I ain't got a hell of a lot of time on here, because that's even touch and go at the 9 days. I've been working on another vehicle too, which I'm going to make a video about maybe, because there's not a hell of a lot on that car either. But anything I didn't go over, leave comments or whatever. I'll try to answer them. Happy swapping.